The most recent Inside Star Citizen episode, which focused on FPS combat, has worked Chris Kyle wannabes into a seething shoot, and these marks have taken to the appropriately named spectrum in force to air their grievances. What am I talking about? Scope Glint. You know, that silly little feature FPS games are forced to include to balance weapons that, for some reason, possess the power to effortlessly one-hit kill a player from a distance. Some players don't like that. They feel like they should be able to sit well out of weapon and visual detection range of other players and deliver a one-hit kill the moment their target takes his hands off the keyboard to pet his cat. To them, this is compelling gameplay. And of course it is. They're stupid. But to the rest of us, it is annoying. And for some reason, the one-hit kill remains constant in modern FPS titles. So us normal folk just have to deal with it. But let's discuss it a bit in depth. Every FPS game now feels the need to include a sniper class. It is an unwritten rule. But before we can properly discuss the other topics in this video, I think we need to identify and describe the types of players who prefer this role in gaming. The first type of player is the most rare, and they are the recon player. To them, the kill is secondary to their primary goal, which is to scout things out and report back to the rest of their team. These sorts of players are extremely helpful to have and, in most cases, essential. They don't really care too much about getting individual kills, but would rather set their team up to have the highest chance of winning. These, to me, are your ideal snipers. The second type of player is the realism enthusiast. They're either wannabe military servicemen or actual military veterans. You'll know that they're veterans because they will take any and all opportunities to let you know so that you can thank them for their service. They'll write out long reports about how, in the sandbox, they or somebody else carried some really cool weapon that fired this really deadly bullet, and that Star Citizen should have one-hit kills because they fought for your freedom to make games bad, so that they could enjoy them at your expense. Oddly enough, these individuals never stick in their designated containment games like Arma. The third is what is simply known as the bad. The bad is unable to effectively track and kill targets in short to mid-range combat. Since being in close quarters is an anxiety-inducing experience for them, they will instead default to a long-range class, which allows them to do the most amount of damage with the least amount of risk. If you're playing a game with objectives, you can be rest assured that they will not push them with you. If you're fighting against them, you can be confident that the moment you stand still, they will be ready to skillfully land a shot on you that nets them an easy kill. Sure, they may get 5 of those over the course of 30 minutes, but they'll be happy with that. The 5 people they got will hate their guts. The fourth and final is the MLG swag bro. They're not smart enough to play games like Armor, where you have to calculate a bunch of nonsense to land a headshot on a target. So they tend to stick to games like Call of Duty, where the sniper is seen as the pinnacle of skill, and getting a kill after spinning around in a circle is seen as something worth recording and putting up on YouTube. Curiously, these players avoid proper competitive FPS titles and also think controller aim assist is okay. I think that just about sums up who plays a sniper. Which one are you? Let me know in the comments after you're finished trying to insult me. Realism nerds and all-around general FPS bads have collectively cried out in horror over the soon-to-be featured Scope Glint and Star Citizen. They've prepared monolithic write-ups for developers to read on why this is a bad idea and how it is 900 plus years in the future and that we should have hex covers on scopes to prevent such a thing. You've read them all before, you've heard them all before. It is the same tired argument from the same bad, stupid people who say bad, stupid things. Here is the harsh, cold reality of it. Snipers in FPS games are a low-risk, high-reward gameplay style that attracts teenagers, bads, idiots, or a combination of the three. Nobody cares how many Punisher logo patches you have for your airsoft chest rig. snipers are almost exclusively enjoyed by players who could all be best described by the Dunning-Kruger effect. What they do not realize is that scope glint isn't a new concept. It wasn't invented by Battlefield or games like it. The purpose of scope glint is to warn good players that there is a bad player nearby with a weapon that could potentially kill them in one shot. The bad player would have no idea how to handle such a warning or what to do with the information presented to them. That is why they're playing a sniper in the first place. The good player will be able to use that information given to them by the scope glint to negotiate the threat. And that is the basic idea behind scope glint. But like I said, it isn't new. Team Fortress Classic had this way back in the late 90s, early 2000s, with Laser the Sniper class had. Even back then, developers knew you had to put limits on bad players getting undeserving kills. Not to mention getting a one-hit kill in TFC was pretty hard given the style of game that it was. Some people who legitimately want to play recon may be negatively impacted by this, and for them, I can sympathize. You're a rare breed of player who views the sniper role as a support and recon role, and not a cheap and easy way to get kills. I respect you, but you must suffer for the sins of the father. You are now lumped in with the mouth breather who has watched the movie American Sniper over 100 times. And now your preferred style of play has been impacted due to this. Perhaps CIG will give you a spotting gadget? I don't know, we can only hope. But I think it is important to ask this question. Those of you using the recon argument to try and get scope glint removed, are you willing to also lose your one-hit kill? If so, I would consider having it removed. But this requires a high level of thinking to comprehend, a prescience those who play snipers lack. Scope glint exists because one-hit kill exists. If you remove one-hit kill, you could possibly remove the glint. But they don't really want that. No compromise for them. It's all or nothing. And it makes sense. You would have to be a selfish loser to play as a sniper in the first place, so I am not shocked that they cannot think about the bigger picture. But in considering the bigger picture, with massively procedurally generated battlefields spanning entire planets, not just maps that we replay, learn, and memorize down to the potted plants and furniture, I think scope glint has to remain, no matter what, just to improve the flow of a battle and make long-distance combat feel satisfying for players. It's the same reason why we're getting ground scanning to detect other infantry on the ground. Without it, you may just never find people in a battle at all. Unless your game is specifically designed from the ground up to support one-hit kill mechanics, there is absolutely nothing of value that a one-hit kill adds to an FPS title. In certain games, it could be insanely fun. The games in which those mechanics are fun have created an entire minigame around it and have sequestered it off and away from the rest of the real game to not compromise the integrity of the product. A great early example of this would be Unreal Tournament with its Instagib mutator. Servers running that mutator would be presented with a unique weapon called the Super Shock Rifle, if I recall correctly, and it could one-hit kill another player anywhere you hit them from any range. It didn't matter. And when you died, which you would do a lot by the way, you just instantly respawned and ran out to do it again. Shoot, die, respawn, repeat. That game mode was a ton of fun, and I played it a lot, but it was kept away from the primary game rule set for a reason. In order for one-hit kill mechanics to be good for a game, the game must, as I mentioned earlier, be built around it. It isn't good enough to just slap a one-hit kill weapon into a game and expect things to just work out, because they won't. And since they don't work out, that is why we've seen the industry move towards adding features like scope glint to games as a way to counterbalance their power. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a look at what features allow one-hit kill mechanics to work in games, or at least be tolerable. Respawn mechanics. I would argue respawn mechanics are the most important element of any game. Respawn mechanics should dictate your design on everything from the TTK to objectives of the game, time it takes to do things in the game, everything and anything. This is very much higher level design theory and concept, so I will not elaborate much further on it in this video, but the general idea is that if you're going to allow players to kill other players fast, then they need to be able to respawn and return to battle fast. It is that simple. This is why game modes similar to Instagib from Unreal Tournament are fun and not annoying. Game's overall TTK. If your game has an overall fast TTK, the one-hit kill doesn't really matter too much. Day of Defeat, for example, had a very fast TTK, and everyone was just killing people under a second regardless of the weapon they used. So one-hit kills didn't matter too much in that game because of it. But if your game is moving the overall TTK up, which is good design, by the way, the one-hit kill weapons become even more powerful, desirable, and ultimately troublesome for the game. If everyone is using weapons balanced around a 1.5 second TTK, for example, how do you balance a weapon that has a TTK of instant? You don't. You could say, oh well, it is harder to aim or use, so people need to be rewarded. But if the reward is a one-hit kill, which no other weapon can do, you're going to see people just using these weapons over all others when something that matters is on the line. You already saw this in Star Marine with the P6LR. The weapon was broken. One-shot people minimum, maximum two-shot. Anyone who wanted to win just used that broken weapon. Game design goal. If your game is going for realism, one-hit kill mechanics are expected of the players playing it. They want that realism, and one-hit kills are realistic. This is more for your ARMA players. If your game is going for semi-realistic, think Battlefield, you should absolutely abstain from including one-hit kill weapons. But if you must put conditions upon them which make them less annoying. And I won't use the word tolerable. They're never tolerable. But the conditions which make them less annoying to players that have to endure their wretched existence are scope glint, scope sway, bullet drop, bullet velocity, and anything else which makes the one-hit kill sniper rifle as annoying to use as it is annoying to be shot by. And I'm going to use that word for a reason, annoying. Because one-hit kill sniper rifles outside of realism settings are inexcusable and annoying weapons for a game to feature. And no, Star Citizen is not realistic, nor should it be. Weapon rarity. This somewhat ties into game design goals, but if weapons that one-hit kill are rare, expensive, or generally hard to come by, you can justify their existence. This isn't a new concept either. Quake did this with power weapons on the map, such as the BFG, and Unreal had the Redeemer. Halo still features it with the sniper rifle and Spartan laser. It could be done. The weapon just has to be rare or something you, as a player or organization, can control. That doesn't mean it lacks balancing factors or warnings, such as scope glint or some other audio-visual cue. However, if obtaining a sniper rifle is as easy as finding one in a bunker from a brain-dead NPC or buying it from a terminal, that will quickly become tiresome and detrimental to the game's health. Star Citizen will most likely feature one-hit kill mechanics, and nothing I can say or do is going to change that direction. Too many stupid people think those are a good feature, and as we all know, stupid people are far more numerous than intelligent people. When stupid people get together in mass, they can force their stupid beliefs upon us. Just look at American politics for that. So, since the stupid people have made their stupid voices heard and CAG is going to try one-hit kills, I can only offer ways and suggestions in which I would balance such a stupid thing being forced upon me. The first is the one that is already done, which is scope glint. Players need a visual cue when an enemy is about to potentially kill them in one shot. This way, players can spam AD strafe like hyperactive morons, maybe jump around a bit too, and sprint in random directions. Those behaviors, while evasive, are all stupid and are all products of having one-hit kill weapons in games. If standing still for even a second means potentially being instantly killed, you as a player must never stand still. Spectrum users who support one-hit kill snipers for immersion and realism will now have to get used to players running around in circles and erratically strafing in the most unimmersive and unrealistic way possible because the risk of being instantly killed is far too great. The second thing I would do, since I'm being forced to endure the insanity of one-hit kill weapons and yet another FPS title, is to make these weapons extremely rare and sought after. Bunkers, player traders, perhaps drops from the upcoming raids, or anything else could serve as sources for obtaining them. I could begrudgingly accept their power if these weapons are treated like a rare resource that has a chance to benefit organized groups of players for taking the time to farm and stockpile them. If crafting ever became a thing, this could also add value to certain resources. The third is I would reconsider certain bad game design features that are no longer relevant in the current year. The first is to rework how Death of a Spaceman is going to work, or just remove it. Because I could promise you that stupid idea isn't going to fly if someone is getting popped in one shot by some mall ninja sitting in a bush hundreds of meters away camping a trade terminal. I'd also take this time to reconsider how respawning in general works for Star Citizen. If we're moving towards having one-hit kill weapons, we need to explore ways to lessen the time cost of death. Not the material or resource cost, but the time cost. Forward spawn points, multiple spawn options upon death, including a spawn point closest to where you died regardless of where your regeneration point is set, and improved revive or medical gameplay mechanics could all help lessen the annoyance of eating a one-hit kill. The fourth and final is to make heavy armor impervious to the one-hit kill. Armor has to have value, and allowing a player in the heaviest, most expensive armor to be instantly killed by another player, potentially with no armor, is not very good design. You could put a lot of other restrictions on heavies, and I did a video about that. But I still firmly believe that it is the only armor in the game which should not be allowed to be one-hit killed by a sniper. I will never be a fan of one-hit kill weapons against armored opponents, but I will just have to accept that they're most likely here to stay. Who knows? I could be wrong. This is all still just a test after all. Heavy armor being resistant to one-hit kill, coupled with scope glint, would most likely be enough to balance it and make it far less annoying than it otherwise would be. But those are my suggestions. Since I strongly dislike one-hit kill weapons in games, I would have designed these weapons to be, at a minimum, two-shot kill weapons, but also focused heavily on their potential to wound. The wound system is something other FPS games don't typically have, and it's something I would fully utilize in Star Citizen. If you're unfamiliar, the more wounds you have, the less total HP your character has. Wounds are powerful debuffs, and snipers being able to inflict them gives them a unique role in Star Citizen. They can cause chaos by creating medical strain, inducing panic, and weakening enemies from a distance to make the jobs of their teammates who are up close easier. In a way, this would probably be more beneficial for a player in the sniper role, as those wounds can be strategically used to decide how to deal with a target. Is the target running? Shoot for the legs to slow them down. Is the target heavily armored? Aim for the chest for a guaranteed torso wound that will hinder his ability to fight. Use your imagination. You're trading the absolute one-shot kill for a more interesting, guaranteed system of wounding your opponent. That, to me, sounds a lot more enjoyable and also emphasizes teamwork. I'd leave one-hit kill in for players not wearing any armor. I'd actually let them die to a sniper rifle anywhere. I hate people who don't wear armor almost as much as I hate snipers. The eternal loser with gear fear that only wears his flight suit that he spawns with should be killed over and over again until he puts on a suit of armor. No remorse. But if players were wearing armor, I would allow, at the very least, medium to stop a one-hit kill against some of the weaker sniper rifles, and heavy to prevent all. So you could still one-hit kill against lower armors, but you also maintain interesting gameplay of guaranteed wounds without the proliferation of one-hit kill mechanics. How each sniper rifle worked would be up to CIG. I wish I could offer more in-depth suggestions on each one, but I really do hardly use the things. I have way too much testosterone to use those weapons. Am I allowed to say that in 2024? Anyway, maybe if somebody from CIG was to see this video, they could pull up the metrics to see how many times I've used them. I don't know. I'm not the authority on their balance. But in general, the lower the refire rate, the higher the damage. Maybe give that electric bolt action one a cool snare effect regardless of where it hits. or perhaps spread the damage throughout the body and cause numerous minor wounds instead of one massive one. CIG is smart. They'd come up with a great way to give each one character. Oh, and I would still keep Scope Glint. I think it is important beyond mitigating the power of one-hit kill weapons. I mentioned this earlier, but it improves battle flow and helps players find other players in the open, dynamically created battlefields of our Star Citizen future. We need Glint and scanning for this to work, people. Star Citizen's FPS is heading in exciting directions, with each major update bringing incredible improvements. The introduction of Scope Glint is very welcome, and it will be better for the game overall, regardless of whether sniper rifles one-hit kill or not. I believe that if Star Citizen were to rework its respawn mechanics into PU, it could offer a uniquely engaging FPS experience unlike any other game on the market. While it's not there yet, and as of this video's recording, the FPS combat can only be described as janky and amateurish, I see the progress, the changes, and the dedication of the CIG FPS team, which fills me with great confidence. The inclusion of one-hit kill mechanics isn't going to make or break the game for me. I admit, I rolled my eyes a bit when I saw it being reintroduced for testing. However, we're here to experiment in the game, so that's fine. Personally, it won't affect me much at all. I've dealt with one-hit kill snipers in so many shooters over the last 20 years that I know how to handle them. Just spam AD strafe, jump around like an idiot, and never stand still. Exploiting the bad netcode helps a lot too. Playing like that isn't fun, but it's certainly better than respawning and taking 15 minutes or more to get back into the action. Anyway, thanks for watching if you made it this far. Bring up your scopes and come shoot at me in the comments. I'm ready for all you bads yet again.